Greetings, fellow Gorehounds, and welcome back to a Blood Splattered vlog. I'm the Horror Guru.
And I'm Count Jackula.
And today we're going to talk about The Gorge, an Apple TV exclusive science fiction horror romance from director Scott Derrickson of Sinister, The Black Phone, and Doctor Strange fame. I mentioned this movie is a science fiction horror romance, and in the pre-spoiler section, I can explain half of that. I can explain how it's a horror romance, but I can't explain how it's a science fiction film until we get to the spoilers. So
right.
Just be warned about that because all of that stuff is second act spoiler territory. But the reason why this is a horror romance is because the movie follows two sniper mercenaries hired by their respective governments to watch over the titular Gorge, this massive trench in the middle of fucking nowhere. In fact, they're not even allowed to know where they are when they're taken to it. And they're supposed to guard on either side of this gorge, of this trench, in case monsters start to crawl out of the trench.
Yeah.
That's the basic premise of this movie. There's a lot of stuff that happens after this premise is set up, the first of which being these two characters, Levi and Drasha, I think is her name. They fall in love while watching over this trench because they are two lonely soldiers or ex-soldiers turned mercenaries just looking for some reason to continue to live. And that's the whole reason why they're in this gorge in the first place, because their governments had decided, well, these two are pretty expendable.
No one's gonna miss them.
No one's gonna miss them. They have no one waiting for them at home. So let's use them.
Kind of makes you wonder how this hadn't happened earlier.
Yeah, now that's the first thing I'll say about this movie. Despite me thoroughly enjoying this movie and thinking it's a great watch and you should all go check it out if you have Apple TV, this is a very easy movie to pick apart logistically.
Yeah.
Logistically, this movie has so many holes that leave you scratching your head going, wait, hold on. Does that make any sense? Why would you just have two people watching over this trench?
Why wouldn't it be at least two on each side?
Well, exactly. You would want someone to be able to perform medical operations on someone on the other side if something were to go wrong.
Yeah.
So wouldn't you want like a team, maybe 5 people on either side? One of them is at least a doctor in case something happens to the other 4.
Yeah. Also, there's this whole okay, the ones on either side are not allowed to communicate with the other. But as you see in the movie very quickly, how are you supposed to stop them?
Well, yeah, because communicating with each other is also kind of essential to stopping these hordes that crawl out of the trench. The ability to be able to point to hey, the monsters are coming out over on your side is essential to stopping these things.
Yeah. Monsters coming out of this fucking gorge isn't a once a decade occurrence or something.
No,
It happens with some frequency.
It's not necessarily happening every day, but over the course of the 6 months that this movie demonstrates, it happens a couple times.
Yeah. So at least a couple times a year, you gotta
Yeah.
You know.
And it's not just a simple sniper job, it's one monster crawling out. These are hordes of creatures. It's the depths of hell has opened up in this trench.
Yeah.
And these things are crawling out of it, and they're the guards at the end of the world.
Yeah.
Now, putting the logistics aside, everything else about this movie pretty much works.
Yeah.
The two characters are great characters. They're very well written. You do find yourself endeared into their romance very quickly.
It helps that Anya Taylor-Joy is one of them. The other one is also the worst, Mr. Fantastic from the worst Fantastic Four.
Yes, Fan Four Stick. Miles Teller, which most of you will either remember as from Fan Four Stick or from the drummer movie Whiplash. That's probably what he's most well known for.
Yeah. He does a really good job in this movie, unlike some other roles he's had.
He's great as our primary protagonist, and what he kind of his presence in the movie kind of reminded me of John Carpenter movies.
Yeah.
He felt like a John Carpenter protagonist. It actually added to the overall vibe of the movie, which kind of has that desolate, isolated feeling of a lot of John Carpenter movies.
Yeah.
Like The Thing or Assault on Precinct 13. This idea of isolation with a horde of danger just lurking under the surface at any moment. But the thing that doesn't feel very John Carpenter-y is the romance at the center of it.
Right, yeah, there would usually not be a romance at the center of a John Carpenter movie.
But that's the part that is the reason to watch this movie above all else. The monsters are great. Like, I love the monster designs, but the two characters unable to communicate to each other directly, so they're doing it with like hand signals and things like that, playing chess by like signaling like what chess spot they're on and stuff like that, forming this bond. That stuff is what makes this movie so endearing. That being said, the monster action is pretty dope too. It's super dope. I do feel like, especially in the second half of the movie, there's some like wonky green screening at times. I do not believe those characters are in this environment at all.
Yeah. You're like, that is not a real truck, but whatever.
It's the kind of green screening that feels like some of them were probably like pickup shots later because they realized in reshoots they needed to like fix a few things. But I'm willing to let that shit slide because like the movie is so engaging otherwise.
Yeah. One of the things that I did appreciate about the movie is it went from a will they, won't they to by the second act, they've pretty much gotten together. Then it turns into a different type of movie.
Yes. It's not one of those romance movies where you're waiting for them to get together at the very end. Not in the slightest. They get together pretty much by the second act of this movie. But by the time that happens, other things happen that forces the movie in a completely different direction. The situation with the gorge itself changes over the movie.
Yes.
And once that happens, it's like, well, now are we even going to survive that part of this equation? So yeah, that's The Gorge. I adored this movie despite all of its obvious flaws and holes.
It does ask you to just accept the premise.
Yes.
This is one of those. They're like, look, two guys on opposite sides of the gorge, they have to defend it, otherwise the world ends. Okay, just go with it. It's like Stalker that way. Because you're like, look, you have to buy a lot of stuff in order to follow Stalker, but it's still a genius movie.
Another highly underrated movie that I think would make a great double feature with this, for those of you who have seen it, because it was briefly in theaters and then was just kind of dumped onto streaming, and most people I know did not bother with it, but it's actually pretty good, is the movie 65.
The Adam Driver?
Adam Driver.
Oh, okay.
Adam Driver. Yep.
Okay, now I remember this.
It's actually from the filmmakers who made Heretic.
Really?
It was one of their earlier movies.
Oh, okay.
Another movie like that is like Pitch Black.
Oh, okay. All right.
Pitch Black isn't perfect, but it's a perfectly fun, tropey movie.
Yeah. Okay.
The Gorge is currently available on Apple TV. I feel bad that it's stuck on Apple TV because I don't think a lot of our viewers have Apple TV.
Nope.
But I think a lot of our viewers would really enjoy this movie if they sat down and watched it.
Yeah.
It's got John Carpenter vibes. It's got like the horror romance thing like down pat. And the actual action stuff in the second half of the movie is pretty fucking dope.
Yeah. And it's a Scott Derrickson film.
It's a Scott Derrickson film. Like, he usually does good shit. Let's move on to the spoilers so we can talk about all the stuff that we've been vaguing around in this early half of the video. So here we go. By the time we get into the second act, the characters have figured out a way to interact with each other directly.
Yeah.
The American sniper, Levi, played by Miles Teller, figures out how to create a grappling hook to grapple to the other side of the gorge so that he can spend time with the other sniper, and they dance, they make love, they have a great time. But unfortunately, when he tries to grapple back, one of the bombs goes off.
Oh, that's right.
Because the monsters start to attack during that time. Ends up snapping the grapple that he has set up, and so he ends up falling straight into the gorge, so Anya Taylor-Joy's character has to dive into the gorge to save him.
Turns into an action science fiction movie.
Yes. We're in some sort of Lovecraftian nightmare where trees, their roots have teeth and will eat you.
Yeah.
Like, there's giant insects that have skulls for faces, and they try to rip you apart. There's men on horseback, and the horses themselves look like they're like fused with the earth somehow.
Yeah.
And these men on horseback are also like, you can see right through them because
because they're like made of plants.
They're made of plants. These characters have to survive in the gorge and find a way back up out of the gorge, and along the way discover some hard truths about the gorge. If you're like me, you've seen a lot of movies about World War II experiments.
Yep.
A lot of movies will have like Nazi experimentations. Think
Overlord. Or Overlord.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Where like Nazis experimented during World War II with the occult and biological warfare and created monsters. Well, this movie posits, what if the American European side.
Yeah, the Allies.
The Allies.
What if it had been the Allies?
What if they did those kinds of experiments and created essentially a pit to hell?
Yeah.
On Earth that has people fusing with the animals, insects, plant life, creating these monstrosities that cannot die but are eternally hungry. Mm-hmm. Actual buildings that are left in this gorge from when they were experimenting there have turned into these weird, like, skull palaces.
Yeah.
Filled with insects that are part of the structure but can detach and attack you.
Yeah, it gets really wild.
It feels like something out of, like, an H.R. Geiger Lovecraftian nightmare.
I was thinking more Hieronymus Bosch.
I could see that. While they're in there, they go to various different environments. Like, they start off in, like, a foresty area. They go to, like, a town that's been overrun. And then they go to, like, an industrial, like, complex where all the experimentations were being done. I kept thinking as they were walking through these areas that they reminded me of, like, levels of, like, a survival horror video game.
Yeah. It's intended to feel like a bit like a video game, but not in a bad way.
Yeah, in, like, a good way. They walk, like, from the forest into, like, the overrun town, and it feels like they're stepping into, like, an environment in Diablo. And when they, like, go into environments like the industrial complexes with all the experiments and the labs and stuff like that, I was thinking, like, Dead Space.
Yeah.
All that stuff looks cool as hell.
Yeah. So it's really weird because it goes from this, like, horror romance and then turns into
an action horror movie, right? All of a sudden, they're the protagonists in Doom.
Yeah.
And they have to fight their way through these monsters.
Yeah, and it works surprisingly well.
It's better than any of the attempts at movies like Doom.
Oh, yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
I feel like
better.
This is a better adaptation of some of those games than some of the actual game adaptations they've gotten.
Oh, God, yeah.
My favorite part about it is that you're not expecting this going in, because when the movie started, I was just like, they're never going to actually, like, show us and explain what the Gorge is, right? It's going to be like this mystery throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, because, like, that's not the real story. The real story is these two people's relationship.
Yeah.
So they don't really have to explain that, so they're probably not going to.
Well, yeah, because a lot of movies wouldn't, because a lot of movies would leave the mystery to be the horror in and of itself, the unknown, right?
But not Scott Derrickson, not here.
No, he takes the approach that's very similar to, again, John Carpenter.
Yeah.
When John Carpenter made The Thing, usually the unknown is the most scariest thing, but if you can come up with something horrifying enough that it's scarier than not knowing, then you'll really have something special, and that's what John Carpenter essentially did when he made The Thing. That fog, that mist that covers this entire gorge, that's actually the infection itself.
Yeah, that's the biohazard agent.
You know, so when they're in the gorge, they're actually being exposed to the biological agent. So there's this big question at the end of the movie when they're trying to make it out of all this. Are they going to make it out of this only to turn out to be one of these creatures by the end?
Yeah.
Or not? Now, they actually do have an answer of that. And
that does get answered.
We'll talk about that in a minute. But first, I want to talk about some of the stuff that happens in between then and now, such as the fact that they discover that the governments couldn't destroy these things. So they decided to contain it. But then while containing it over the years, the governments, as governments shifted and changed hands and all that stuff, decided to start experimenting with it again.
Yeah.
And at one point during these experiments, they actually set up an atomic weapon to drop inside the gorge to essentially try to burn everything and eliminate it all.
Yeah.
And naturally, the moment you find that out, you know that the end of this movie is going to be them dropping
the
that
bomb.
Especially since we know their governments are going to come and try to kill them.
Bomb,
yeah. And that essentially becomes the climax of this movie. The governments discover, well, the American government side discovers, with Sigourney Weaver playing the shady fucking person who hired Miles
I
Teller's
kind of like
character.
her shady corpo era.
She's been playing that a lot lately, and she's really good at it. But the governments discover that, oh, you guys went down there, you guys know the truth, now you guys gotta go.
Yeah.
Like, you guys have broke the rules, now we're gonna pull out all your pubic hairs.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tenacious D quote there.
Yeah.
But the two of them are very aware they've been caught.
Yeah.
So they set up their own trap because, surprise, surprise, two crack shot sniper mercenaries that you've hired are really fucking good at dealing with hordes of people coming after them. That's why you hired them for this in the first place. So they end up setting this entire fucking elaborate trap, essentially setting off the bomb, killing the American soldiers that come to hunt them down, and essentially destroying the gorge.
Yeah.
But they're both on either side of the gorge for this to happen, so they're supposed to rendezvous and meet up. Miles Teller's character, Levi does not make it to the rendezvous.
He does not make it to the rendezvous point.
So you have this like really sad moment of like, oh, was their romance doomed? But the movie decided to go the happy ending route, and she has started working as a waitress in France. And who comes in but Levi, Miles Teller's character, and the two of them reunite and live happily ever after.
As a punishing industrial soundtrack played.
Oh yeah. Well, it's because the score was Trent Reznor.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah. But during the movie, it's like ambient Trent Reznor, right? Which is perfect. But at the very end, it like turns into like a fucking Pretty Hate Machine.
I will say this though.
Wait a minute.
It does remind me of another action horror movie. Science fiction action horror movie.
Are you gonna say Event Horizon?
Event Horizon.
Event Horizon,
that would make a great double feature with this, to be honest.
Actually, yeah, it would.
If you like movies like Event Horizon, which also has a lot of like logical leaps within it that you have to make if you're willing to roll with it, then you're probably going to enjoy this movie too. The Gorge is a really good movie. It's got its flaws, but if you can look past the flaws because the movie is engaging enough, you will have a good time. And with that said, where can they find you, Count Jackula?
Well, you can find me here on YouTube, where I stream every weeknight starting at around 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I would love to see you there.
Y'all know me, I'm the Horror Guru. You can find me on various streaming platforms, but these days I primarily use Blue Sky, so follow me on there. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that notification bell so you're notified of my videos immediately upon their upload. And if you'd like to help out either of us more directly, be sure to check out our Patreon pages. And remember, if you decide to check out the Patreon page, even $1 a month can go a long way, but we will certainly accept more. And if you made it this far into the video, then I want you to comment below, and be sure to comment below using the hashtag TrenchLoveFair.
So that's actually a really good summation of the movie.
It's a very good summation of the movie. Use that hashtag, that way I know, that way Jack knows, that way the whole world knows that you are capable of finding love at the very end of the world while fighting monsters of human creation. And with, ooh, who's the real monsters, right? Yeah. And with that said, my fellow Gorehounds, peace out, and we'll catch y'all later.